The Marino Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of The Marino Show. I'm really excited to talk to my guest today. Stephen Farber is the CEO and founder of Hero Culture. His organization is focused on helping businesses really keep and retain employees by building engagement. Stephen, thank you so much for joining me today.
I'm excited to be here, David, for more reasons than one. But yeah, definitely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and full disclosure, I have to say, Stephen, for everybody that's watching, used to work for me when I was a news director in Midland, Odessa. He was a news photographer at the time, but he has since, grown. That was about, maybe 10 years ago already. So it's so exciting, Stephen, to see like you taking your career in the direction that you've taken it and just the growth that you've even experienced as a professional. So I had to say that and put that out there. It's great having you and seeing you in this way.
Well, absolutely. And it's a pleasure to be here. And, David, I've told you before, you're a big inspiration for me on just getting things done and making things happen, because you did that over at our new studio. And it was fun to see. And it was very inspiring to me as well. Somebody who didn't know what they were doing at the time. And you could argue probably still doesn't entirely know what they're doing, but definitely, finding a purpose and working towards it is something that I saw you do a lot of, regardless of if you had a choice or not. So, I appreciate the inspiration.
Well, thank you. Let's dig into Hero Culture. What is the idea, or what was the idea behind founding your organization, and what do you hope to accomplish with it as you continue to move forward?
Sure. So Hero Culture, it's really funny because it's kind of become a story of a rebranding. Because if you look up hero culture on Google, there's a couple of different things you'll get. Most of them are negative, and I didn't know this when I founded it. But I guess if you have a hero culture in a workplace, it typically means somebody has taken on the role of hero and they're steamrolling people. It sounds like a villain to me, but that is kind of the way it's done. So what we've done with hero culture is we're turning it around, and we're trying to create systems and tools and trainings that can position companies to not only attract good talent, but retain them the right way, so that you're not scrambling, trying to find the right people for the right job. And instead you're building almost a family in your organization that is working towards a conducive goal, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And in the time that we're living in now, especially coming out of the pandemic that we were in for 2 years and still coming out of that as we speak, I think there's been a lot of discussion around work culture and really being happy in your workplace. I know, my parents' generation, it wasn't really about being happy in the workplace. It was more about going to work, getting a paycheck, keeping your head down, and just working. Whereas I think, over time that has changed, but this conversation is more relevant than ever as people try to adapt back into the workplace, and really their mindset has shifted into what do they want in their life? How, are they happy in their career? What does make them happy? So when you talk to, the different people that you talk to, whether it's a city government or a big organization or a small organization, what are some of the things that you really see them needing to be guided with when it comes to employee engagement and keeping people in their workplace?
Right. And you brought up a lot of good points. We could really unpack a lot of things there. But the one thing that I think you said that really resonated with me, it resonates with everybody right now, whether they like it or not, is that things have changed. And the pandemic has, in a way, I can't think of a better word other than very much accelerated kind of where we were already going, maybe in 10, 15 years, but we got there in 2. And it had a lot of people scrambling. You saw businesses closing doors, people being let go. It was a rough time for everybody, myself included. And what I saw when all of this was happening was all of this change and all of these, I think, what's the term? It's like what's good for the goose, good for the gander. Here's a better one. All high tides rises all ships. So what I mean by that, David, is we're in a world where the power has kind of shifted to a candidate focused market where there's a lot of jobs coming back. And not only are there a lot of jobs, there's a lot of people out there to get those or to take those jobs. But people now kind of understand that they have things to choose from. I think you mentioned, as opposed to, I know in my parents' generation, it was very much you go into work, you work 9 to 5 at overtime, things like that. You're trading your time for money. But with remote culture popping in out of nowhere, the hybrid workplace being a huge deal now, people know that they have options and they're putting that to the test whenever they are looking at employers. So it really comes down to 3 things. And to answer your question, just the first thing is the thing that I really try to lead companies on first and foremost is in differentiation, because you got to stand out now more than ever. Everybody is taking all the newest benefits. They're trying to do hybrid if they can. The last thing you want to do is just force everybody back into the office. There's certain jobs where that is the case, but most jobs know that they can now work at least hybrid. And if you aren't doing something special or something unique, it's getting tougher to find talent. So the first thing we talk about is just differentiation, and we kind of go from there on, okay, what does that look like for this industry, this specific company? And it's a case by case basis. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely, it does. And I do think, like you said, a lot of corporations, small, big, they are now doing a hybrid work environment. When I was reading through the different things that you offer to clients, you said there's a 4-step framework for retaining and training top talent. And I'm regurgitating this. It's self-awareness is 1, social awareness is 2, style flexibility is 3, and cultural resonance is 4. Can you just kind of touch on that and sum that up for us on what that means in terms of keeping and retaining that top talent?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and it comes out to 4 steps because that just kind of seems to be what it comes out to. And I think it's important for people to have a framework, and that's kind of why it's listed that way. But the first one, which you mentioned, was self-awareness, is knowing who we are. And I think anybody can tell you if they've taken something like a personality test or a Myers-Briggs or a DISC or any kind of assessment that tells you a little bit about who you are, or if you've seen a counselor or a therapist who helps you discover kind of what drives you, what makes you think the way you think, how are you wired? That's self-awareness. And teaching that in a company is huge for culture in general. It's huge for building out what you want to see in terms of cohesiveness in the workplace. And kind of to make that, or to break that down, is you do that by teaching, and you see a lot of this in diversity, equity, and inclusion courses as well, that we all can be different, but that's okay. And how do we best communicate with one another? Because I have a certain way that I talk, a certain way that I like to be recognized, a certain way that I prefer to work. That may be very different from the way that you feel about it, David. Like, we have different things. It doesn't mean I'm right and you're wrong. There's no morality attached to it. It's just a brain wiring. So that is self-awareness. Do you want me to continue?
Yes, go on. Yep.
Perfect. So the next step would be social awareness. And it's really just the natural evolution of self-awareness. You are taking what you know about yourself, and then you're applying that to everyone else. You're teaching yourself, you're looking for what those other personalities are. So, for instance, with what we do, we like to use birds to kind of show the different personality styles, because it's very easy to remember that way. And we use DISC, if anybody here is familiar with DISC. So as opposed to I'm a dominant, low in interactivity, high in conscientiousness person, I could say, hey, I'm an owl eagle. And they're like, oh, okay, that makes a little sense. You think of an eagle, you think of somebody who's, to the point. They don't ask a committee about what they need to do. They're just direct. An owl might be more analytical. Anyway, I'm going to jump off the birds here. Point is what you want to do is you want to be able to identify those bird styles, those personalities, whatever you use, whether it's birds or not, in the people around you. And when you do that, you can say, okay, I may be a parrot, very interactive, very optimistic, but Stephen over here, he's an owl. He's more analytical. It's not that he hates optimism, but it doesn't speak to him like data does. So what social awareness teaches is when I go to talk to Stephen, if I'm Stephen's boss and I want him to perform well, or maybe he seems like he's had some issues lately. What I need to do is I need to talk to him in a way that best makes sense in details, or with data. If I'm giving him feedback, I need to do it in a way that makes sense to him. It's we have a term here. We call it the home rule. Some people call it the platinum rule, because you've heard, David, you've heard of the golden rule, right? Who has it, right? Yes. Treat others the way that you want to be treated. And that works for things like kindness and honesty and any kind of virtue. That doesn't change. But when it comes to the workplace and you want to lead people a certain way, or you want to see things done, it makes sense to lead them in the way that makes sense to them, that they're best led by. So you flex your personality to meet that other person's personality in that moment when you're speaking with them. And it allows them to actually take that information in and work. And this happens in seconds when you're good at identifying and just knowing who you're talking to. And what we've done is we've just taken that and we turn it into a training so that leaders know how to talk to their direct reports, and employees, instead of gathering together in a dark corner and talking about how much they hate the company, they can actually say, oh, times are tough right now because of this, or that. They can look more towards the purpose versus inwardly at just how bad is my life. So it creates this other kind of outside ourselves understanding so that we can get a bigger picture. Does that follow?
That makes sense. And, and I really resonated with that, what you were talking about, because I think in the workplace, one of the big issues and that can really change the culture is when either you have a leader or you even have, your employees who don't take the time to really try to understand other people's personalities.
I mean, a good example of this would be, think you go to a restaurant and it's, say you're touring to a different country. I'm just going to use France because I've always wanted to go there. I go to France, everybody's speaking in French. I don't speak French. It's just noise to me. And then 4 tables over, somebody starts speaking in English. All of a sudden my ears perk up. I can understand that. That is exactly what's happening when you start speaking to somebody's personality style. They actually understand what you're saying. And I'm a firm believer that most people, there's probably a few meanies out there, but most people don't just want to be mean. They don't want to be condescending. It's just a translation issue for the most part. So to your point, we like to call the direct personalities eagle personalities. If you come into an eagle personality who's very task-driven, goal-oriented, prestige is what he cares about, and you tell them that you're overworked, it's making you sad, it's making you really stressed out, and this and that, it's not that they don't care, but they don't understand the problem as well as you'd like them to. That's not an excuse for them, but it is just what's happening. So then they turn around and they tell you, well, listen, the job has to be done. And what they're thinking is, well, task to goal. They have to get the job done. And they don't connect as well with those emotions. And then you walk away going, they only care about this job. They hate me. And whereas when you just create a little bit of understanding, it stops that automatic process that we all do, which is kind of imposing our personalities on other people. Because, I mean, we think we're right. We live every day in our own shoes. So we just naturally think the way I see something's got to be right. But more often than not, it's not the whole story. It's just, and I've had the hardest time learning this, most things in this world are just not black and white. Yeah, there's tons of gray area, and that's kind of where those all fit in at.
Yeah. And then you also had style flexibility. That was the next one. How would you explain that?
Style flexibility is kind of putting it all together. And that is, once you understand who you are, what's my personality? I'll use an example. A client of mine, we had a manager who was definitely a parrot, emotionally driven, very optimistic, very enthusiastic. And parrot personalities, which are high interactive personalities, they tend to bond through social experiences. So this is a type of person who I would normally be aggravated at because they're always cutting me off in conversation. But in their world, they're just trying to bond through a shared experience. Like if you tell a story, they're going to tell you one similar because they like you, because they want to keep the conversation going. But to other personalities, it's like, oh, you're trying to one up me. And that's not the case. So we had a manager who total parrot, and he managed it was an owl, very analytical, data-driven person. And he would give these reviews that were just like, David, you knocked it out of the park. Fantastic job. Love what you did. I need you to do this next week, by the way. Go ahead and give me a 10-minute PowerPoint on it. It's going to be fantastic. And the guy would be like, well, do you have any questions? And he'd ask questions and he'd say, oh, don't worry, I know you got it. He's thinking, I'm just going to motivate the heck out of these guys. It's just positivity. But this analytical person, they are freaking out. They're like, oh my gosh, like, what did I do right? How do I replicate that? How do I make that? They're going home at night stressing to their wife, who's probably a different bird too. Maybe their wife is an eagle and they're just saying, well, just get it done. So you have all these clashes happening because of just not understanding your personality. So flexibility is, again, understanding who you are and then flexing to meet someone else where they're at. So with that manager, he now knows when he gives feedback, he can stay himself. We're not telling him you have to become a different person, like master of disguise over here. But you can flex and say, hey, I really need this PowerPoint done. You did an awesome job, David. It needs to be about 10 minutes long. Yeah, 10 slides. Do you have any questions? And allow them to ask questions because this is a questioning, data-driven personality. So it may not be fun for this optimistic person, and they may just think, just go get it. But you got to slow down for these slower paced, more reserved personalities. Likewise, if you're a parrot and your manager is an owl, you might get bored to death. They're giving you all these details like, David, you did such a fantastic job. Love the presentation last week. I need you to do it again. 10-point font if you don't mind. You may be able to do Times New Roman. I'm not sure. Make sure you hit a specific intonation. And you're just sitting here going, did you like it? Like, that's all the parrot cares about. So anyway, case in point is style flexibility is taking your style and dialing up the other birds, dialing those up so you can meet those people, communicate with them effectively, and everybody is just meshing at that point.
Yeah. And then finally, cultural resonation.
Yeah, so cultural resonation, and this is a short one here, is really when you teach all this stuff, does it stick? Like, does it hang around? There's all kinds of personality trainings out there. DISC is not the only one. It's been around forever and nobody owns it, but it's how you implement things, because wisdom is only wisdom if it's remembered. Otherwise, it's just something smart you heard one time, but you can't quite recall it. So that's really the big deal behind the birds, because the personality styles have been around forever. But when you put something vibrant and visual like a bird to it, and you make it fun and interactive, and you also, in these trainings we do activities. Like we had a conflict training the other day where we had a group of 8 people try to all hold up a pole. Some people think it's called the helium pole exercise, where you each have a finger on this pole. You're trying to lower it, but you just keep raising it up because everybody's putting a little bit of pressure. And the whole point to that is if you all work together, you can lower the pole if you bring your fingers in. And people walk away from that saying, wow, that's not the way I thought you handle conflict. It makes sense that we all have to come together in a certain way to make it happen. So we do that along with visual reminders to make sure that this training is something that people not only loved, because you're not going to remember something if you didn't like it anyway. You might if it's really bad, but for the most part, you want to remember it in a good way so you can bring it up. And then it's going to stick around. You're going to continue to remember, okay, I'm a parrot, my boss is an owl, this is how we talk. Your boss is going to do the same to you. And the big answer here, or rather the big return on investment for people, is that communication improves, employee engagement goes through the roof. And SHRM put out a study just the other day that 97% of employees are expecting a better employee experience next year. Like, that is what's going to drive them. And employee experience is all about how they are treated, how they perceive to be treated and handled in the workplace when it comes to recognition, praise, and feedback. So that is cultural resonation. Make sure it sticks.
And again, to drive the point across, isn't it true, and you probably know this better than I do, that most people don't leave jobs because of money necessarily? It's really kind of a variety of factors, but how happy are they with their boss? How happy are they in their work environment?
Right. It's I think it's 57% of people they quit their managers, not their job. And we dug into that a little bit. The interesting thing is when you ask the question, okay, well, David, why did you quit your manager? And there's a couple of different responses there, but 2 of the big ones that we found to be the easiest ones, well, not necessarily the easiest to fix, but the ones that make the biggest impact, are improving recognition and improving feedback. And both of those are managed by communication. If you're talking, because the companies that are doing this, they're giving feedback, they're giving recognition, they're awarding people, they're doing one-on-ones and 360 reviews and all these things. But it doesn't matter if you're not speaking their language. it falls on deaf ears. They don't have ears to hear. It doesn't work. So improving that solves, you could argue, 57% of your retention problem. And that's worth investing into better communication and engagement.
Is there something that you see that seems to be kind of, no matter where it is, it's a constant?
Yeah. And this transcends industry. It's everywhere, but it's the vicious kind of turnover cycle. And I don't have a good word for it. It's been described as unrelenting turnover. And what I mean by that is when you have an employee leave for whatever reason, and then you have to pull somebody else to either cover for that person or train for that person, so your productivity is affected. You're also probably paying this person more. If you're not, they're going to remember that, so they're becoming bitter as well. Depending on who this person was, morale could be affected. And even if this wasn't a great person, somebody leaving under terms that aren't very, very rarely perfectly mutual is going to cause some waves. So until you actually get this person back, you're overworking this person who's helping in exchange. And then when you get a new employee, when you hire them on, which is going to cost 6 to 9 months of salary on the average, you now have to pull somebody else to train this employee. So you have this huge, oftentimes 2 to 3 month period of just lower productivity. And you've also poisoned the well with your other employees and your other talent. Now, this can be massively prevented if you just have better communication, rather not prevented, but slowed down, because people are going to leave. It's just kind of the nature of people. But that's the problem I see everywhere, is just one person leaves and then you pull somebody to help. It overworks them, stresses them out. Now you're burning them out. You get a new employee, you're burning this person out from the beginning. They're getting a terrible impression of your culture, and it just doesn't stop until you've lost 10 or 12 people. And then you get a relief, but my goodness, that hurts the bottom line, and it hurts just a lot of people's futures, including their own.
Yeah. For you, what was the kind of the instigator and you forming Hero Culture? I'm interested to know that. Like, what was it that got you going down that road and to really become a voice for leaders and employees? Because I think, as I mentioned earlier, it's so relevant. It should have always been important, but it is even more crucial now in order to keep people, whether it's a leader or an employee, in a workplace, because I think their ideas have changed. They really do want to be happy in their work life and have a balance. The world has changed. So what really got you going down this road initially?
Right. And it's kind of, what got me going down this road was really kind of what you just ended there. It's the desire for this work-life balance that seems to elude all of us. And I left a corporate job that probably wasn't the smartest thing to do in the middle of a pandemic, and really put a lot of pressure on my family. But I did it because I was so stressed out. I couldn't sleep at night. I was constantly just not happy with where I worked, afraid of being let go. At the same time, afraid or over micromanaged. And a lot of it, when I look back on it, some of it was definitely my fault. I'm not culpable, but it was a lot of just not understanding why I was being managed the way I was managed, and the person who was managing me not understanding why I acted the way I acted. Just this constant mismatch. And it wasn't just me. I just watched people, great employees, walk away. And when I was a manager, some of my best people quit due to personality conflicts that they were having with people who were lateral managers for them. And it made me pull all my hair out and then eventually leave myself. And over time, the story goes that I started to see, oh, this wasn't just this one toxic culture. This happens everywhere. And it's such a simple fix. It's just really hard to see. So with Hero Culture, again, the idea was, I want everybody to feel like the hero at this business. Like, I don't want, like the old definitional term of hero culture, having everyone depending on one person who gets burnt out, or one person steamrolling everybody else. No, I want everybody there to be able not only to save themselves, but to be able to be a servant to everyone around them. And in order to do that, you have to understand the people around you. And it's with all the divisionary things that we have these days. Just look at our government. There's so many crazy things happening with the law and the Supreme Court and everything. When it comes to things like personality, it kind of goes over all of that. And even if you disagree with somebody, just talking their language totally avoids most cultural problems in the workplace. And I think conflict is unavoidable, but if we can approach conflict and look at the creativity that could come out of that versus I'm just going to turn and walk away, that's kind of the end goal there. So for Hero Culture, that's the goal. We want to get workplaces to a point where conflict is something we almost look forward to because, hey, we disagree, but we're going to come up with something unique because of it versus this person just hates me. They want me to fail, so I'm going to leave to save myself. Two different attitudes entirely.
And as in life, growth usually comes from difficult things sometimes and conflict.
Growth happens in the valleys, absolutely.
Yeah. So, Stephen, if people want to get a hold of you or want to talk to you more about this, how would they find you? What would they need to do to reach out? What's your contact information and all of that?
Sure. I'll keep it very simple. You can go to heroculture.us. Again, that's heroculture.us. Email is very easy too, Stephen@heroculture.us. Phone number 719-406-0960. I also have a website or another page on my website. When you go to heroculture.us, you can click on the only other tab there, which is Meet the Birds. And you can actually learn about bird personality, well, the personalities of those birds. And you can see yourself in which one of those birds. And if you want to know which bird you are, just jump on my calendar. I'd be more than happy to share some insights with you, whether we do business together or not. It's always nice to find out who you are.
Is there anything else you want to add before? I know we just kind of touched the surface of this. There's so much more, but is there anything else you want to add in terms of, building engagement and just the work culture in general?
Sure. I would say a very quick way, regardless of whatever position you're in, whether you have direct reports or you're an employee or your boss, if you're trying to figure out how best to communicate with somebody, you can start by mimicking their style. How they act. Are they reserved? Are they very direct? Are they very optimistic? Are they very quiet? Do they want details? It may be uncomfortable for you, but just kind of copy the way that they talk, they walk, they speak, and you'll find that you can pick up on their personality. And that's step one to kind of understanding someone. And it's funny because it's an old sales technique that people used to teach, but it has some truth in learning how to talk with someone. And I don't mean you mock them, you try to talk in their voice, none of that. You just literally, it's easy. Look at the way they walk into a room, look at the way that they talk or they shake hands and just mimic that. And you will build this unconscious rapport with someone. They will respect you for that. And that's step one. You can start employee engagement right there with the first person you meet tomorrow or tonight if you're working the night shift.